In this video, we're going to further explore the concept of stacked text, but at the same time also look at some other very important ideas regarding setting up a template file. So this is a file that you can load into the software and easily edit to make a variation on a particular theme. So here we're going to set up a part so that it would be easy to make one of these wedding plaques with the stacked text, but allow you to quickly and easily change the name and date on it for different couples and different events. Some of the key ideas we'll touch on will be how to use the vectors and the layers in order to manage those vectors so that we can assign them particular toolpaths, and also how we can use the document variables so that it'd be easier for us to program different depths depending on the design we had. All this is designed to kind of semi-automate the process so that all you have to do is make the edits to the vectors and then reapply the toolpaths very, very quickly to create another version of this particular design. I'd like to offer some thanks to a couple of forum users who've done some very nice examples of this that I was able to learn some things from. One of the forum users, Mobius, and also Mike Queen have done some nice things with this, and a number of other people have taken this idea and made some very nice finished parts with it as well. So let's start by opening a new copy of VCarve Pro. So let's click on the icon to create a new file. And for this part, I'm going to set up a width of 25 inches, a height of 9 inches, material thickness of 0.75, and we'll work with our date and position in the center for our vector layout and go ahead and hit OK. Now as we start to create our vectors, we're really going to make sure we manage our layers very well with this example. So I'm going to start by renaming layer 1, and I'm going to call it outer border. And we'll actually change that to be a blue color and hit close. Now that's my selected layer, so when we come over and click on the rectangle icon here, with my anchor point set in the center at 0, 0, I'm going to create a rectangle with radiused external corners with a 1/2 inch radius, and the size of this I'm going to make 24 by 8 inches and hit create. Let's go ahead and hit close now. Next, I want to create another vector for my inner border, so I'm going to come and click on the drop down menu for the layers here, click on the button to add a new layer. This time I'm going to call this inner border. I'm going to change the color of this one to be red. Color doesn't really matter, I'm just using that to differentiate them, and hit close. Now that's my current layer, so if we come back to the draw rectangle tool, I'm going to take the same parameters up the top here, but this time I want to do an internal radius corner of 1/2 inch, and I'm going to set the size of this to be 23 by 7, so basically an inch smaller in width and an inch smaller in height, and hit create and close. And so now you can see that's a different color because it's on a different layer. We've got these internal radii, and that's a 1/2 inch smaller on each side of the part. Next, we'll click on the drop down again, add another new layer which we'll call drill holes. I'm going to change the color of this, and maybe we'll make it kind of a violet color there, and hit close. What I want to do is snap my drill holes into the centers of these radii. So I'm going to come over, click on draw circle, we'll enter a diameter of 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to come over until my mouse snaps, and notice it changes there to a crosshair showing me it's snapping to that center position, and I can just click to create that vector there. Now if I wanted to, I could come down and click and create them in the other corners, but I want to show you a couple of other techniques we could use with the snapping, so I'll just go ahead and hit close. Another way we can use the snapping is to drag a copy of a vector. So if I click on that to reselect it, come over the center, and I'm going to hold down the control key on the keyboard so that when I click now and drag, the software is going to make a copy. And again, you can see that snapping to different points, and what I need to look for is the cursor changing there, so that when I let go with the control key held down, I create a copy there which is snapped as well. Another way that I could make these in the same positions over on the other side, because the part's symmetrical, is to select them both, come and click on the mirror selected objects icon, say flip about job center, create a mirrored copy, and click on the flip horizontal button and hit close. So really they're just showing you a number of different ways that we can create those in the right position, either once we've already got some data, or as I started with there, by drawing a circle and snapping that into the drawing. Now we're going to create the different vectors for the text that we're going to need for our sign. This is going to represent a last name, which will be in the background, the forenames or first names, which will be in the foreground, and then a separate set of vcarve text which will have the date of the event on it. So again, I'm going to use the layers to manage these. So I'm going to come up, click, add a new layer. We'll call this last name text. I'm going to leave it black in this case, and so we'll just hit close there, and we can see that is selected. And for this last name text, I want to create a rectangle that will govern its position and size. So I'm going to click on the icon for a rectangle. I've already worked out where I want this to be and how big, so I'm going to enter a value for the anchor point in the center of x0, y 1.25, and a width of 21.5 and a height of 4, and hit create and close. So that shows me what the governing size and position is going to be for this text, as long as I select that when I create the text and use this option here, which is draw text within a vector box. So whatever vector I've got selected, when I click on this, the software will automatically pick up its size and position. So the font I want to use here is going to be Gaudi Old Style, so I'm going to click on the font list and hit G, which will take me down to the fonts beginning with G, and then we should just be able to look within the list and choose the one we want there, Gaudi Old Style. If you don't have that font, you'll just have to choose one of your own or something that's appropriate. Here I'm going to enter the text for the last name, and this is something that I'm going to be able to edit for other designs if I want to. In this case, we're going to use the last name of the couple, which is Montague. I'm going to use the margin size to be none, and vertical stretch is going to be stretch characters on both of these. So I really want this text to fill right to the edges of that vector that I've got. If I hit apply, you can see that's exactly what's happening there. So I have no margin in between that vector and the text, and now we're stretching the characters right up to fill that area. If that looks okay, we can hit close, and at this point I can actually select that rectangle and delete it. I don't need that because the software will remember with this text, when I select it and go into here, the value and position that I assigned to that originally by having that vector selected. So I can delete that now, and we can continue with the next set of vectors. Now we're going to create another new layer, which we'll call first name text. Hit close there, and I'm just going to deselect the text there to make sure we don't pick that up. And this time I'm just going to create regular text because I want the size of this to be able to extend to really fill whatever the names are. So the text for this is going to be the two first names of the couple. So I'm going to put Romeo and Juliet. And this time I'm going to go with French script, so I'm going to hit F on the keyboard, go with French script MT. Now the text height for this I'm going to make 2, and the anchor position for this I want to be at x0, y 0.5, and let's hit apply and see where that is. So that looks okay to me. I like the position of that, so I can obviously adjust this for each individual design as I want to. But if that looks good, then we can hit close. Now the last set of text is going to be the date, which is going to feature underneath here. So again, I'm just going to deselect that. I'm going to click on this, add a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer vcarve text. Now this will always be used as is. I won't need to do any additional edits to this, which I will need to do to the names, as we'll see later in this example. So I'm going to change the color of this to orange, and we'll hit close there. And now, making sure I've got nothing selected, we'll click on regular text again. In this case now we're going to add the date that we want here. So let's go ahead and enter 17th of March 1350. Obviously this is a bit of a guess as to what this would be. And for the font I'm going to choose Gaudi Old Style again. So The anchor for this is going to be at x0, y minus 1.75, sorry, minus 2.25 there. So x0, y minus 2.25, and we're going to make the text for this 1 inch high and hit apply. So I think I'm just getting my values mixed up there, apologies for that. I think what I actually want is 2.75, so that's x0, y minus 2.75, and if we hit apply I can see that's in a little bit better position. As I say, these are positions that are and sizes that are pre-worked out, but obviously you could stretch these and adjust them as you want for each individual design. Let's go ahead and hit close on the text form there now and just click to deselect that. So this set of vectors will represent those that we're going to edit if we want to create a different version of this sign with different names and different dates on it. So I do need to save this as is, but then we're going to go through the process of actually welding the text together and calculating the toolpaths, so we can also save the toolpaths in with our template file as well. So let's come up to File, Save As, and in the project folder I'm going to call this Stacked Text Template, and then as we create the toolpaths on this, we'll go ahead and save over this version of it so we've got everything we need in it. So let's hit save there and you'll be able to find that in the project folder. Now at this stage I want to start making some copies of our text so that we can appropriately weld it together to allow us to create the toolpaths so that some of the text will appear to be in the foreground and some will appear to be in the background. There's a fairly straightforward process to this, but it's important that you don't miss out any of the steps. Now you'll remember we've put our name text on 2 layers, last name text and first name text. Now the first step is to select the vectors on the first name text layer, so I can do that from the layer manager here by clicking on the little notepad and going to select layer vectors. If I close that now, I can right mouse click with those selected. I can choose the option to copy to layer, and we're going to create a new layer that I'm going to call top text. So this will be the text that appears to be on the top. We can change the color if we want, so maybe we'll make that a green color, and for the moment I'm going to make that invisible in inactive and hit OK. Next I want to select the text that's on the last name layer, so again we can do that by using the layer manager. Click on the last name text notepad there, select layer vectors, right mouse click, copy to layer, important to copy not to move, new layer that I'll call bottom text, and perhaps we'll give that another color there, maybe we'll make that kind of an aqua color, and I'm going to make that invisible and inactive as well and hit the OK button. Now at this stage I'm actually finished with those 2 layers, the last name text and the first name text, but as I said before it's important to leave those as they are, because if we want to edit this plaque later I need to make sure I keep those original 2 sets of text, because otherwise I won't be able to edit them once they've been welded. So I'm just going to switch off the last name text and the first name text layer and hit close. Now I'm going to come back to the layer manager, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to switch on the top text layer here, and I'm going to select that layer to make sure that that is now my current layer, so that any editing operations will ensure that the vectors stay on that layer. Now if we zoom in, you can see something that's characteristic of a lot of script fonts. So script fonts are designed to look like handwriting, and so they'll have the kind of tails and the sweeps and things in them, but they're still separate letters. So when you get an overlap like this area here, they're actually separate vectors, and this could cause problems when we come to toolpath them. So it's important we go ahead and take care of that. So if I just select this text and click on the icon to zoom to fit, what we need to do is convert this to curves and then weld the appropriate pieces together. So with that text selected, I'm going to click on the icon to convert objects to curves, and then I need to make sure that I deselect any inner islands, otherwise they will disappear when we do the welding. So I'm just going to hold shift down and deselect the inside of the E's and O's, the J, the L and the E. And in this case I think that's all the inner islands. Now with all those outer vectors selected, I can click on the icon here to weld selected vectors, and if we zoom in you can see that that's just got rid of those overlapping areas, so now these are just a single solid vector. So let's just hit F on the keyboard to fit that in. I'm going to click and then just drag to select all those vectors, and I'm just going to hit the icon to group selected objects. Now what I'm going to do at this stage is take a copy of these and put them onto the bottom text layer. In order for us to toolpath around the bottom text, I need to go around both the vectors that appear to be in the front and also the vectors in the background, so I need a combination of both of those. So with these selected, I'm going to right mouse click, I'm going to say copy to layer, bottom text, and we shouldn't see much happen because we copied them, and the bottom layer or bottom text layer is currently switched off. So now, having welded this set of vectors together, I'm going to undraw the top text layer, draw the bottom text layer and select that so that it's current. So we know we've got one set of grouped vectors here. We converted those to curves and weld them. In order for me to get an appropriate weld between two sets of text like this, again so it respects the inner islands, I need to take the other set of text, which is still text, convert that to curves and group that. So with that selected, I'm going to click on the icon to convert objects to curves, and I'm going to click on the icon to group selected objects. So now I've got two groups of vectors, not text anymore. This has been converted to curves and grouped. So now once I've got these two groups, I can select one, shift and select the other, click on the icon to weld selected vectors, and the software will automatically respect the inner islands of those two sets of vectors. Now immediately that I've hit the weld icon, before I click on anything else and deselect those vectors, I should come over and click on the icon to group them together again so that they're easy for me to select with a single mouse click from the 2D view. So now let's switch back on the top text layer, close this, and we've got all the vectors we need to start calculating our toolpaths. At this stage it's probably worth saving the file again though, so I'm just going to go up to File, Save, and so we can overwrite that there. So and again now we're going to calculate the toolpaths and save those in it too, so we've got this sort of genuinely editable template file. So if we go over to the toolpaths tab, we'll click on the icon there. I'm going to click page down on the keyboard in order to tile the windows horizontally. I'm going to come over and click on the set button for the material setup, and it's important to note at this point, if you do plan to machine this example, that you should make sure you recalculate all the toolpaths using parameters and settings that are safe and appropriate for your machine, whatever tooling you have available, and obviously the material that you plan to cut it into as well. So for this job I'm going to leave Z0 set to the top of the block, material thickness 3/4 of an inch, that's fine. I'm going to set the XY datum to the lower left now for our machining. Of course you can leave that anywhere that's appropriate for you, and the rapid gaps and home position look okay, so we can click the button there. Now for the text, or the layered text, we're going to use two V-carving toolpaths. We're going to use a V-bit so we can really get into the spaces between the letters. And then we're going to use a second tool within that V-carving though, so that we can clear out the majority of the material with a flat cutter before going back with the V-bit. Now to determine the depths of this and to make it more customizable for future edits, I'm going to use a feature that allows us to input our own document variables, and these are variables that I could then edit on the fly and recalculate the toolpaths later, and it will pick up those values. So to enter my own document variables, I'm going to come up to Edit and come down to Document Variables. Now the first document variable I'm going to create here, I'm going to call TD, and that just means top depth. So that's the depth of my top text there. And we'll start with a value of 0.1 of an inch for that and hit Create. The second variable I'm going to create is called BD. I'm also going to make that 0.1 as well at the moment, and that just stands for bottom depth. So that's in effect what the height or depth of the bottom text will be. So let's hit create there. So at the moment these both have the same values, but you'll see later how I'm going to be able to come back and edit those and how that will allow me to recalculate all the toolpaths without having to individually go in and change each one. So we've set up the document variables there. We can hit the OK button. Now, as I say, for our first toolpath we're going to come up, choose the VCarve engraving toolpath, and the start depth of this is going to be 0, but I'm going to come down and create a flat depth here, and the flat depth is going to use one of those document variables. So this is going to be the top text in this case, so this is going to be the top depth. To use a document variable and for it to remain there without me entering the value, I have to create a curly bracket, then I'm going to enter TD and a close curly bracket. So now the software will automatically pick up and use that variable instead of me having to enter a value. For the tool, I want to use a 90-degree V-bit but with a small flat on the bottom of it, because that'll clear up more nicely around the letters. So I'm going to click on the select button. I'm going to need to create this tool in this case, so we'll put this under engraving tools, I think. So we'll select that. I'm going to create a new tool, and I'm going to create an engraving tool in this case because of its small flat on the bottom. Now the diameter of this tool is going to be 1/2 inch, and you can see if I don't edit the name of the top when I create a new tool and start editing the values, it will automatically change the name itself. This is a 90-degree V-bit, which means when we specify an engraving tool that it'll actually have a 45-degree side angle. We can see that in the diagram here. And the flat diameter on this tool is 0.03 of an inch. So sometimes it may not pick up that extra decimal place there, or point, so I've edited that manually myself. Pass depth for this tool I'm going to set to 0.15. Step over, I need this to be in the quite small range here, so we'll maybe go 0.015 or 50%, and the clearance path step over I'm going to set to be 0.15 as well. For things like the spindle speed, the feeds and the plunge, I'm just going to enter values that should be fairly safe and appropriate, and we'll just give this an arbitrary tool number of 1. And need to make sure we choose an appropriate value for the feed rates there. So let's go ahead and re-enter that. So inches a minute there, everything else is set up in inches. Now we can hit apply and OK, and we've selected that tool there. For the flat engraving tool, I'm going to select a 1/4 inch end mill, hit apply and OK. And in this case I'm going to select a we'll actually select an offset pattern for this, I think. So I've got various other parameters I could set here. I'm not going to use those, but what is important is the vector selector. So the way we've set up our layers here, again, by saving this as a template, if I use the vector selector, I can automatically recalculate toolpaths with different vectors as long as they're on the same layers as I use and choose here. So I'm going to go with closed vectors, selected layers only, and for this I want to go between the inner border and the top text, and I'm going to say associate with toolpath so that it'll remember it next time I calculate the toolpaths, and hit close, and I should see these vectors selected there. So we'll call this VCarve top text in this case and go ahead and hit calculate. Now we may want to change the colour we're working with here. We'll go with that and see how it looks. Well, maybe we'll change the colour of our toolpath and use a kind of a bluish colour here. Need to make sure I select both toolpaths and choose the same colours there. And if we choose the first one and preview it, we can see the area that's going to be machined away with our flat cutter. And then we can see with the V-bit, there's a lot of work left to do on this text at the top, but if we preview that, we can see how that's going to look, and that's going to give us this nice beveled edge here on my text. By using the V-bit, I'm able to get in and clear out lots of the small detail that I wouldn't be able to do if I was using a flat cutter on both of these, for both tools in this toolpath. So if we like the way that looks, we can calculate our second V-carving toolpath. This time that's going to leave us with the bottom text showing. So we're going to click on the same type of toolpath, and we're going to be able to use most of the same parameters. The key things I'm going to change is going to be the depth of cut and the vector selection for this. So my flat depth in this case needs to be a combination of both the top depth plus the bottom depth in order to extend that bevel outwards. So what I'm going to enter in here is curly brackets TD close curly brackets plus curly brackets BD curly brackets. So this is picking up both of my document variables now, so the top depth and the bottom depth. In this case, because they're both set to 0.1, that should give me a total depth of cut of 0.2. All the other parameters can remain the same apart from my vector selection. This time I'm going to change that to keep the inner border, but we're going to go with the bottom text. So those other vectors that we welded together, I'm going to associate that with a toolpath, hit close, and we'll call this vcarve bottom text and hit calculate. So now you can see the toolpath is going around as much as it can again with the pocket toolpath. If we just undraw that, you can see what that's going to cut. In this case, we can use the solid preview as well if we want, and then we can see what the V carving or the V bit is going to do subsequent to that. Again, we might want to change the colors here of these, so we can make both of these toolpaths white. You can see when you've associated a color with a toolpath, because you get a little square of color, as you can see here next to the tool within the toolpath list. And now, as they're both visible, we could click preview visible toolpaths and see the result of both of those. So now we can see how that's starting to look. So there you can see that layered up on each of those. Now with the toolpath colors, sometimes it can start to look a little bit odd when we've got a bevel like this. So at this point we may just want to go back to material color and perhaps change this for something that's going to be easy for us to see what that looks like. So you can see the effect of using the V-bit and the pocketing gives us this nice layered text that we can see here. Now the next toolpath I want to create is also a V-carving toolpath, but this is just for this text below the names here, so that basically the date of the wedding or whatever event this is to commemorate. And so we're going to come back to the V-carving toolpath. This time we don't want a flat depth, and the start depth though again needs to use these document variables. Remember, this is depth here is a combination of top depth plus bottom depth, so we can enter that again, TD plus BD in curly brackets, and we can select a different tool in this case. So maybe we want to go with a 60-degree tool. I'm just going to take the default values for this, hit apply and OK. And for the vectors in this case, we want to deselect both of these and just choose those on the vcarve text layer, associate with toolpath, and we'll call this vcarve date and hit calculate. So there, if we preview that, we can see that that's cutting into the surface there based on those vectors, and it's starting at that surface depth, so that looks good. And to finish up, the last couple of things, or last couple of toolpaths, if we just close the toolpath preview there, first is to drill some locating holes for the screws. So I can enter a cut depth. We don't need to go all the way through for this if we don't want to. So maybe we'll just go 1/4 of an inch in, and we'll choose the 1/4 inch end mill. Again, we can go with the vector selectors here. This time I'm going to select just the drill holes layer and associate. Close, and we'll call that drill holes and calculate. So we preview that, we can see those being drilled in there. Close that again, and finally we can come up to the profile toolpath. Going to type in Z equals, so we get the cut depth of our material. If we want to, we could just enter Z and not hit the equals, and again this works like the document variables, so it should just pick up whatever the depth of material is for my part if I enter Z and leave that as a variable rather than calculating the function by hitting equals. Going to select 1/4 inch end mill. We'll just use the default settings for this. Actually, maybe we'll just increase the pass depth to 1/4 of an inch as well. I'm going to go on the outside. I'm going to add tabs, and we'll just enter size of tabs we want there, edit those, and before I can add those tabs though, I need to make sure I've got the vectors selected. In this case, because we're using the vector selector, I'll just need to hit close, come down and click on selector, unselect drill holes, select the outer border and associate with toolpaths and close. So now the right vector selected, and we can come back up to edit tabs, and we can go ahead and click on here to add tabs in appropriate places to hold this in place while it's being cut out. Let's call this toolpath profile cutout, hit calculate, and we can preview that, and we can see if we maximize that exactly what that's going to look like. So at this stage, if we liked the way the preview looked, we could go ahead and save the toolpaths and run this on our CNC. However, the real benefit of the way I've set this part up is if we want to make changes either to this file as is, or if we want to make edits and start putting in different names and dates, but still being able to use all the toolpaths that we've set up here. First of all, let's look if we wanted to make a couple of edits to this design we've got here. Then we'll save this file as a template, and then we'll open it in another session of the software and completely change the text that's in here and show you how easy that will be to do given the way that the part's been set up. First of all, if I look at this, there's a couple of things I would want to change. I'd like to move the names down a little bit to create a bit more space at the top, and I'd probably like to bold the text for the date. So let's just close the preview toolpaths form. In fact, actually we'll just go back in there and reset the preview and then close it. Click on the icon here to switch to the drawing tab. I'm going to switch the drawing tab or the 2D view on and hit F in order to fit this in. So the first thing I want to do is just select the vectors here for the names, and I'm going to move those vectors relative to their current position, and let's try moving them ½ an inch down from where they are now. So I think that looks a little bit more balanced. Next, if I close that, I'm going to grab this text here. I'm going to go to the draw text so we can edit it. I'm going to change that to be bold, and I'm also going to add an established in there so that we can see this is the start of their wedding. So we can hit apply and close, and if we like the way that looks, we should be able to go back to the toolpaths tab and just click on the icon here to recalculate all toolpaths. Now we haven't changed any of the layer information or anything else on there, so in theory if we go ahead and preview, rather than preview the selected toolpath, sorry about that, we'll just reset that and say preview all toolpaths. This should give us a new file based on same set of toolpaths but with the edited position of those vectors and with that text at the bottom having been set to be bold. So that's nice. That's one quick edit that we're able to make and recalculate all those toolpaths easily. Now the other thing we could do here is start to change the depths of cut. So remember we've set the first depth here as top depth, the second depth here as bottom depth. Now if I reset the preview, close this, we come up to edit and document variables, I could change these variables so perhaps they're both, in fact we'll make the top depth 0.05 and the bottom depth 0.1 and hit OK. Software tells me there's a bunch of toolpaths that use those document variables that now need to be recalculated. If I hit OK, click on the recalculate button, and then again we go into the preview and say preview all toolpaths. I don't know how easy this will be to see, but now my first depth of cut is only going to be 0.05 of an inch, followed by the bottom depth being 0.1, and then this V-carving is still going to have picked up the appropriate depth from those document variables. So if we look now, we can see there's less definition of the top because that's half the distance as it is from here down to here. So that's the way those document variables work. Now at this stage, I want to save two versions of this file. If we just close the preview, I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and I'm going to save a file called Stack Text Romeo Juliet and hit Save. So we have a copy of that now. But what I also want to do is save a version of this that we can use as a template that we could load at any time that we wanted to make a plaque like this and be able to easily change the names in here and very simply recalculate the toolpaths. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and we'll just rewrite over stacked text template and hit Save. So yes, I want to replace that. Now, I don't want the welded text in this template though. So what I'm going to do is come back over to the toolpath, the drawing tab, click on the 2D view here, and we'll make a couple of edits. Let's come down to the Layers tab, and what I want to do is just switch off all the layers for a moment. I'm going to switch on the bottom text layer. I'm going to keep that layer, but I'm going to delete the text that's on it. I'm going to do the same with the top text layer, switch that on and delete it. Now if I switch on the two names layer, if you remember, we moved the text down after we'd edited it. So in order to retain that, I'm going to select both of these and move these, that's set size. We'll click on move relative to its current position, -0.5 inch. And then the other edit we made is with the vcarve text, we made that bold, and that's actually picked that up now because we edited that and not the welded version. So if we switch these back on, we've got all our design. We've got our last name and first name text. Remember, that allows me to go in and change those now if I want. That is the versions of those texts before they've been welded together. And if we just save over our template file, in theory what we've got here now is going to be very easy for us to open and make changes to. So at this stage I'm just going to sew and exit this copy of vCarve Pro. What I want to do is show you how we could take that template file and make it read-only if we wanted to, and that would ensure that we couldn't overwrite it. We'd always be prompted to give the file a new name if we tried to save over it, and that would effectively save that as that template file without us accidentally making edits to it and changing it. So let's go to a different area of my Windows desktop here. What I'm going to do is open a copy of Windows Explorer so we can access the files and folders on our PC. A nice shortcut way of doing this is to press the key down on your keyboard, which has a Windows logo on it if you have one of those, and then the E key at the same time to open Explorer. Now I'm going to navigate to the location where I saved that file. So you need to remember where you'd put the file on your particular PC. And then to change this so that I can't accidentally overwrite it, I need to make it so that it's read-only. I'm going to right mouse click over the file that I want to do that to, go down to Properties and check the box here so it says read-only and hit Apply and OK. Now I'll be able to open that with the software, but if I try and overwrite that file, the software will prompt me to give it a different name because it'll say it's read-only, and that ensures that I won't accidentally change that template file. Very, very useful thing to do if you have the type of products where you want to save a sort of basic template but be able to make edits to it without accidentally changing it. Now another useful Windows technique that we can look at while we're here is how to change the number of recently opened files that are available to you from a particular program. You'll know that within the Vectric software it'll display the most 4 recently opened files in a list when you first open it. Sometimes we get asked about having a longer list. We don't really have the space in the interface for this because we have to accommodate many different resolutions, but what you can do is change this for Windows. And how we do this is if we create a program on our taskbar, then we're able to edit what's called the jump list. So here I've got my vCarve Pro icon. If I don't have an icon for this on the taskbar, I can click and drag this down and I've got the option there to pin to taskbar. You also may be able to access that by right mouse clicking on the icon as well, and you can see that's just made a copy from where I can start the program. Now if I right mouse click on this, then I get this recent list, and at the moment this is displaying the 10 most recently opened files. If I want to make this list even longer, then what I can do is just right mouse click anywhere on the taskbar where I don't have an icon. So this is down the bottom of the screen here. If I right mouse click there and go to Properties And let's just minimize that window there. So within the properties here, I'd go to Start menu, click on Customize, and there at the bottom it's got Start menu size, number of recent programs to display, number of recent items to display in jump lists. And so if I want to, I can increase these. We'll go with quite large numbers in this case. Hit OK, Apply, and OK. And now if I right mouse click on this, you can see I get a list of the last 20 if there's 20 items to fill it. So just a nice way there that you can easily access a lot of recently opened files without being limited to just accessing the 4 that are shown to you within the software interface itself. All I would need to do is click on any of these and they will open automatically within the program. So we've had a brief interlude there to look at how we can make our templated file read-only so we don't overwrite it accidentally, and also quickly looked at the editing of jump lists there. Let's restart VCarve Pro again and come back to our stacked text template example and show you how we can use the file we've set up to edit the text and very easily then recreate the toolpaths because of the way we've set out the layers and the way we've used those document variables. So we'll click on the icon from the recently opened files here to open the stacked text template file. Now, just to demonstrate what the read-only has done, if I go up to File and Save, it tells me there that it failed to delete the original file, access is denied, and that's perfect. That's just showing me I can't overwrite that file. Now I can go to File, Save As, and I can give this a different name. So in this case, I'm going to call it stacked text template, and we'll add the names of the people we're going to change here, and we'll call this Mark Cleo and hit save. So we've got a different version of this. Now we want to change the text on this to reflect the information that we want for the new plaque that we're going to make. So to do this, we can come up and we could click here, come down to last name text in the layer manager and say select layer vectors, hit close, and now we could come over and click with that selected and change that to be the surname of our new couple. So I'm going to type in Anthony there and that will fill the same space. Next, if we close that, I could come into here and we could go for the first name text and select that, and we could click and we could change that. So we'll put Mark and Cleopatra, hit apply and close, and then finally we could select the text here for the date. We can just click to edit that and we'll put something more appropriate, so some Roman numerals, maybe a space and a Roman month and a Roman year. Obviously this could be any information you want, this is really just as an example for fun here. Hit close. Most important thing is these remain on their original layers. Now the next thing we need to do though is obviously weld together these different parts of text so that we get the correct versions of those vectors that we're going to be able to machine around. So if you remember how we did that, we took the first names and we right mouse click, copy to layer, and we put those on the top text layer. We took the last name, right mouse click, copy to layer, and put that on the bottom text layer. So first name's top text layer, last name bottom text layer. Switch off the two name text layers here, and we're going to select the top text layer there. And what we want to do is weld these together again. So this is where we've got the overlapping areas from the script font that you can see between the letters there, and we just want to weld those together. So let's select this, zoom to fit, then we're going to click on the icon to convert the object to curves. We're going to deselect the inner islands of any of these letters to make sure they don't disappear when we weld them. And now with those selected we can click on the icon to weld, and then we can reselect all of this and group it together. So that's the top text edited. Now we want to right mouse click and take a copy of that onto the bottom text layer. If we switch off the top text layer, switch on the bottom text layer and select it to make sure it's current. So now we've got one group that we've just created there. What we need to do for the Anthony text in this case, or the last name, is select that, convert that to curves, and then immediately click on the group selected objects icon. They have to be converted to curves and grouped before I can select both of these, and then click on the weld selected vectors. Again, as soon as we've done that, while they're still selected, click on group, otherwise I'm going to end up with a lot of separate vectors. So you can see how that could become a fairly quick process. Now the only things left for me to do before I can calculate my toolpaths is to switch on the top text layer, so make sure all the layers are on that have vectors on that I'm going to need to machine. If I don't do that, then they won't get machined. The vector selector will only pick vectors that are on layers that are currently switched on. Next, I might want to check under Edit and Document Variables my depths here. So maybe we'll set this one back to 0.1 again, hit OK. Software tells me I need to recalculate a whole bunch of toolpaths, so I need to recalculate everything because we've edited this. Now we could tile the windows, come over to the toolpath tab, and I should just be able to hit recalculate all toolpaths, and the software should look at the vector selector for each toolpath, pick up the new sets of vectors that we've entered in here and put onto the appropriate layers and calculate the toolpaths accordingly. So if we click now on the preview and say preview all toolpaths, we should get a new plaque with different names and a different date, but still with more or less what we know to be a safe and working set of toolpaths, assuming you've tweaked these to be correct for your particular setup. So to finish off, let's save this. So file save, overwrite the one that we saved separately there from our template, and we've pretty much completed this example. We've looked at some interesting things in here though. First of all, we went through quite a detailed setup of our original part to create the template. To do that, we were very diligent about our use of layers and how we organised them and named them. We created specific layers for data that we didn't want to actually toolpath, so that was the first name and last name in this case, because we needed to do subsequent operations on it to weld it together that would have made it very difficult to edit. Eventually, once we got a part that we liked the look of, we were able to save that both as something we could cut at the state where it was saying Romeo and Juliet, but also then to kind of clean that up a bit and save that as a template file. We went out into Windows, we set that template file to be read-only to ensure that if we use it in future we can't accidentally overwrite it, and like you saw me do here then, we can use that template though to open, create a separate version of it, and very quickly and easily edit the data that's in it and use the same set of toolpaths again and recalculate them very quickly based on having used that vector selector when we did our toolpath setup. And that concludes this example.